Today, my guest is Dr. Paulina Cecula. She is the co-founder of Dama Health, which is the women's health startup. Welcome, Paulina. Really nice to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. And the pronunciation was perfect. Thank you for having me.
I had to practice before, during our test recording, but genuinely really excited to have you on the pod today. Excited to learn more about this, something I'm not super familiar with, but I know you're going to provide a lot of educational content as well while we talk through about many things. But I guess before we start with all the questions about Dama Health, what you guys want to achieve, what you guys want to do, I always like to start with the beginning, with the background. You have a fascinating, very interesting background. You went to med school at Imperial College London. You worked at NHS as a doctor, as a clinical entrepreneur, and then you ended up starting your own, co-founding your own startup. I guess one of the major questions I have, what personal professional experiences inspired that transition from clinical medicine to the startup world? And during that process, what have been the biggest, the most major mindset shifts?
Sure. And again, thank you so much for introduction, for having me and spreading the world about our work and this journey. I'll always start by saying that the journey is not linear, and it wasn't that I planned to leave clinical training and start a startup very early, actually, in my career. It's more about meeting the right people at the right time, minimizing my long-term regrets, and making some bold decisions. So happy to walk through the journey, and things kind of happened in parallel. So happy to answer the questions on this as well. I went to med school with this big ambition to work in global health, and I really cared about having like a broader impact and about preventative healthcare. While getting involved in different like global health initiatives at Imperial, I came across this world of medtech and healthtech and innovation. And I think this is where being in London and being at Imperial really helped to get exposure to that, because this was like 6-7 years ago, where the industry was still pre-COVID, like there's not that many doctors involved in that space. I think it was still like up and coming and a bit niche. So I started sending like million emails to founders and trying to meet them to really get to know the space a bit better, because I realized the impact for technologies and AI and innovation in healthcare, and I really wanted to get involved. So then I actually got really lucky, and I got this part-time gig with SarahCare. SarahCare is a company now that is really big, probably one of the fastest growing health tech companies in the UK. They're in the social space. And at the beginning, they were still fairly small when I started getting involved with them. I worked with product and tech and operations. And really that where I got the exposure and learned about what doctors can do in startups and what the impact you can have when you actually shift to the industry in the startup world. So I spent over a year with them working across different teams. Yeah, taught me loads about how I can contribute to the field. And then I went to business school. So I was doing things in parallel. So in med school, you can get 1 year to choose whatever you want to do. And in my case, I went to Imperial Business School at the same time as I was working for Sarah. So it helped me apply what I'm learning and really think about what I really want to take out of the business school as well. And at the business school, I met my co-founder. So one thing leading to another. We were actually introduced by another boss, another side hustle that we were doing. And the boss told us, you guys should really speak because you're both really passionate about women's health. And at the time, I was still thinking about my global health journey, women's health, gynecology, endocrinology. So I wasn't yet oh yes, I'm just going to, leave med school and leave my career to start a startup. But I was working on a quality improvement project actually in contraception. And my co-founder was looking into pharmacogenetics of contraception. So the study of how genetics impact our response to drug and our metabolism. So we started talking and we discovered that we are really kind of looking at the same problem. We had similar ideas for the future of women's health. One thing led to another. We met our chief medical advisor now, a founding member really of our team. He's a key opinion leader in pharmacogenetics of contraception in women's health, based at Yale. So the three of us came together, really passionate about innovating and bringing the precision personalization to women's health, and decided to start Dama Health. So in terms of that mindset shift that you asked about, it was obviously a huge decision to completely reinvent myself and this initial idea of global health, clinical training, becoming a medical expert, to then actually becoming an entrepreneur and trying to innovate and do things that are very uncertain and there is no right or wrong and you have to figure things out and navigate it. But it was very obvious at some point where we already started having a team. We had some funding from investors. It wasn't doing both. I wouldn't do it very well if I was to try to do both, right? The clinical training and being a co-founder of a startup. So I completely pivoted. And, the big mindset shift as well is the immediate impact that you might have on your patients when you're practicing medicine, to actually working to something that is more long-term, impactful, long-term future, and trying to build something new in the world. But I think actually I realized it aligns more with me because I wanted to do, global health impact and preventative healthcare. So generally, I actually think this was the right decision for me in terms of just what aligns and what I'm passionate about as well. But yeah, big mindset shift and big day-to-day life shift as well.
Gotcha. If you don't mind, I want to ask a follow-up question because it's something I also sometimes think about my own journey myself. Medicine is such a long journey. You studied 6 years, and it's a very difficult journey, and it's like it's a vocational thing too. Like if you study economics or history of business, you don't really have attachment to one particular field, but medicine is very much like very specialized. So there's a bit of an emotional attachment to your past, to your journey too. And kind of like the sunk cost too, in terms of like the time and the investment you've made in many ways. Was it difficult leaving it behind, or were you like, you were certain that this is the right decision, right path for you?
Yeah, great question. And I think a framework of mind that I have now in life and journey startup world is being like 51% certain of something, not 100% certain. And like thinking about decisions in, is it a one-way door or is it a two-way door? So I can always go back to medicine, right? I can always go back to clinical training, and I still have my license to practice. So technically I can take a shift in acute medicine and obs and gynae on a Saturday if I want to. So it's not that like, you can always go back, but there's certain things that and opportunities that come in life that you just have to say yes to as they come, and making that decision and kind of minimizing the regret over time of like, if I haven't tried this, like, will I regret this? And that's how I make the decision. But it's a big shift in terms of the expertise and the personality, and just really thinking about like, am I someone that really wants to be like an expert in one molecule, like a PhD style? Like, am I going to be the best surgeon in like removal of gallbladders? Like, like really honing in on the expertise and something more narrow? Or are you actually someone that is more interested in like knowing a lot of things, but knowing maybe a little bit less about them, right? Like knowing enough to be able to do things that across different skills and different areas of a business. It's quite a personal, actually, like, what suits you better? Are you someone that like likes to juggle a lot of things and gets bored easily? Or are you someone that's like super passionate about the details? So I think, to be honest, it's just kind of understanding yourself, like your own strengths and skills as well, that can help you with those decisions.
Gotcha. That was a really good answer. You already touched upon how Dama Health came to be with your co-founder and with your medical advisor, but I still want to ask a more detailed question, I guess. So how did the idea for Dama Health come about, and what specific gap did you come across that made you think, okay, there's an opportunity to create a solution?
Yes. So when thinking about new ideas for products, startups, solutions, you either have a very clear problem. Okay, I found this is like a big pain. Or you actually see a trend, right? Industry is moving that direction. I think the future of medicine will be X, Y, and Z. What do we need to do to make that happen? And in many cases as well, it's a combination of both. So you find a problem and then you find a solution because of the trends and like you see where things are coming. So in our case, it was a combination of both as well. So as I mentioned, I was working on this quality improvement project. So this was with my GP practice. I was just doing clinical placement, and I noticed this clear problem of like contraception prescribing. It's because I was also in like a central London GP. Like I saw a lot of young people coming to this GP practice, super busy. The visits are like 5 minutes, no time to actually personalize care and think about what's best for this patient. Like, let's review all these different options, make a shared decision, and really counsel them. So if the patient knew what they wanted, that was super easy. But a lot of the time, patients were really worried about like, the side effects, what option is best for me. There's like 14 different types, and there's literally, kid you not, more than 200 different pills. It like just combine hundreds of some pills. So there's like so much choice, and there's no really way to predict upfront like which one would be best for you. So you just kind of navigate and figure things out. I would try to go like, okay, this is the one that we prescribe the most. Let's try this. And in NHS, a lot of things is about like, which one is the most cost effective? So like, what's the cheapest one that does the job, doesn't cause you many adverse reactions? Unfortunately, this obviously leads to like trial and error. And a lot of doctors were actually telling me, look, I really don't know, right? Like how to prescribe this in a way to know if this patient is going to react well. So I came across this problem, and then we were just developing a very simple, like honestly chatbot back in the day, but that was like years ago. So there was no LLMs, nothing. It was just developing like a digital tool for my GP practice so they can use this before the visits. So I was looking into this and thinking about the data and the digital health tech side of things. And then I met Elena, and she was actually also looking at the same problem, but from a different angle. So she was speaking to all her friends, and all of them were experiencing side effects and issues with contraception. So she noticed that people would try like 3 to 4 times, and they can't find the one that works for them, and they're trying to on their own navigate all these different brands, because she was a scientist. So like her friends were like scientifically looking into like the formulations and trying to do like Excel spreadsheets of like which pill would be right for me. So they were manually trying to like personalize this for themselves. And then she found Dr. Aaron Blazowicz, who is the KOL that I mentioned in our medical advisor. He was probably the only person in the world that decided to look into genetics of contraception. He's an OBGYN. Currently he's leading a lab at Yale looking specifically into that. And he was actually realizing that your genetic variants and your genetic predispositions affect how you metabolize hormones, exogenous hormones and contraceptives and others. So that genetics actually impacts your risk of developing side effects, your risk of just responding to contraception very differently to your friend. So that's how we all came together, like all of us noticing the problem, all of us noticing that there's potential solutions and that the future of medicine will be, data-driven, biomarker-driven, but that this area was lagging behind so much with such clear, obvious needs, piecing things together, joining forces, and that's how Dama Health started.
Gotcha. Just to, I guess, recap, and you can answer my follow-up questions for that, but I'm going to recap it, and in case if I'm missing something, add to it. So a couple of the reasons why it's hard to essentially find the right contraception or the treatment is because the time constraints that you get with your GP, the number of abundance of options available to you, and the genetics factor, which different people, obviously, with many drugs react differently. Am I missing something? Would you want to add to that? Why is it difficult to personalize?
Yeah, so there's a lot of just biology that we don't quite fully understand yet in terms of response to hormones, and genetics plays a role, but it's quite a complex system. From the research that we've seen, on average, is those 3 to 4 different methods that someone tries, and actually like around 1/3, sometimes the metric is like even 40% of women would stop using hormonal contraception in the first year due to side effects. And in the meantime, the data shows that those people who continue those methods, they actually also often have the side effects, sometimes not knowing that they are experiencing side effects, and they can really significantly impact their quality of life and their health outcomes, because they can be things like headaches, irregular bleeding, issues in like libido, nausea, pelvic pain. Like it's hormones, right? So it affects your whole body. So that's kind of like the problem that we've seen in the patients. And then we looked into, okay, what if you had the right method? What's the sort of benefit of that? And we realized, obviously, hormonal contraceptives can also bring health benefits. So things like protection from cancers, also helping with menstrual bleeding if some people have really struggling with that. So there is benefits to that as well. So then the problem was, okay, how do we figure out like which drug to which patient and which formulation? But there is such variability in response. So like, again, your friend might react very differently to the method that you're going to love. So it's very hard to even ask your friends, right? Like, and that's, I think, the default that people would go of like, how did you find this contraception? But actually like the variability in how like individual response is so vast. And it's really with any medication, but it's difficult with hormones because hormones just affect so many systems in your body. And the side effects are also not well studied. As I mentioned, they can range from, menstrual bleeding to libido. So like, and mental health and adverse like blood clot reactions. So they can also affect many different systems, and we don't quite understand fully the mechanisms of that as well. There's just a gap in data and research on this specific topic, because the way the contraceptives were brought to the market was just, it's safe, it's not causing very big adverse reactions, and it's preventing pregnancy, right? That was the main outcome. And I think as now the shift is a bit more towards optimizing health outcomes and thinking how contraceptives can actually help with managing symptoms, it's more about tailoring the right formulation to the right person. And hence kind of gets me to the important bit that the huge gap and this huge problem is especially for people who use contraceptives for things like PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome, PMS, premenstrual syndrome, endometriosis, so actually managing menstrual symptoms. And that's when the drug really needs to be able to help manage your symptoms at the same time as not causing you too many of side effects and adverse reactions. So it's just very difficult to personalize without actually having the data and the research on biology, really. And that's the real problem in general women's health, like not having enough data and evidence on mechanisms and female biology. And for us to answer this question is specifically understanding, having the data on like response to exogenous hormones. That is the gap.
Gotcha. There's so many factors, and I'm going to ask later on how you're trying to optimize Dama essentially. But before I move to that. Actually, very fair points. I mean, I think there's a similar problem with antidepressants too. You know,
Yes.
it's very much like trial and error method, and you get to try different drugs, different medicine until one works just fine and doesn't have as many side effects. But one thing I think with antidepressants too, it's like if you switch quite fast, quite rapidly, it has extra like debilitating effects, like the side effects. If you're even just switching between, because it's like even switching medicine that leads to those side effects. A similar problem does a similar problem arise in contraception medicine when you're like trying to switch very quickly from one medicine to another? Do you experience extra issues like that?
Absolutely. And it's a very good point you made about the antidepressants. It's a very parallel world, and that we often say and compare to, because there's also pharmacogenetic tests that can help with prescribing antidepressants. However, it is a very complex system with those as well. You know, there's no one kind of ideal solution that you just take this test and it's going to tell you exactly what drug is best for you. It's quite complex. But the same applies to oncology and other areas like that. The thing with contraception is that very often it takes a bit of time to see the response of your body. So that's the actual problem. It's actually, you know, usually the doctors would recommend 3 to 6 months on the method to really see if your body adjusted, which then means this trial and error can last years, because you're trying something for 3 months and then you're like, oh no, like I don't think it's working. Maybe I should keep going a bit longer. You try a bit longer, then you have to get another appointment, and then you try a different drug. It's, you know, and if you don't have someone that actually guides you through this process and systematically changes that medication. I literally spoke to someone in the US recently that tried 10 pills. And she was just like, I'm trying to do it on my own. I'm trying to find the one. Like, it takes years. And it's such delay to treatment, because imagine this patient actually has PCOS and endometriosis. Like, she's not managing her symptoms, which affects her fertility and her health outcomes and just general health risks, because people with those conditions have other health risks.
Yeah.
It just takes years and years, like just delay to treatment. And to be honest, the same problem is across medicine. Like, there's a trial and error, and like with different medications, it's just that in this particular case, we are lagging with the data and research to be able to close that gap.
Interesting. And you touched upon a very interesting point. It's not just the individual health; it's also the years and of years just trying to figure out what the issue is and the potential like complications of it, which also puts a huge burden on the healthcare system, especially in a place like UK where it's already very strained, the healthcare system. I guess one very quick question: what's one major misconception about contraception that you wish more people understood?
There are so many, and to be honest, the more I know about the space, the less I think I know. For example, like I do deep dives into research on like how contraception affects cortisol and stress levels and things like that, and like very often end up thinking, oh my gosh, like we really don't have conclusive evidence on different things. But all of that causes a lot of fear and a lot of stress in women, and there's a huge movement away from hormonal contraception. There's a push for I don't know if you've seen on social media, you know, saying that hormonal contraception is like really awful and things like that. And I worry a bit that like for patients who are managing symptoms with hormonal contraception, they actually found one that works for them. It's a bit like demonizing and, oh, you know, why are you using this thing? And I really advocate for like one size does not fit all. And there's so many options, from natural cycles and not using hormones to copper coil and to actually like different types of hormones and different dosage. And I really do think that you can find one that works for you, whatever that is. And I think that that's the problem, right? The truth is more nuanced. It's not like it's good or bad. Like, it's based on the individual goals, lifestyle preferences, and situation. And if you're an athlete, like you may not be able to afford having heavy periods, or maybe you are in a contraception desert, an abortion care desert, and you cannot afford to get pregnant. So I think just being a bit more mindful and nuanced around the fact that there's all these options, and if that doesn't work for you and the risk benefit for you is too high that you don't want to have the hormonal side effects, but for someone else it's like having a huge positive impact on life, is just not like demonizing it and just realizing that it's all super, super individual.
You're very right. And people like to put everything in black and white boxes, but in medicine is one of those fields where like things couldn't be any more grayer. You know, it's always like this spectrum of things. I guess coming back to Dama, you talked about what it's essentially trying to solve, but I'm more curious about the technology itself. So how you guys are using the technology, the platform, to personalize hormone therapy decisions. Can you walk us through the process, the platform?
Yes, of course. Let's talk about Dama. So I talk about this all the time. So our mission is to bring precision personalization to prescribing in female health and tackle this trial and error that we are seeing. So our technology actually analyzes all these complex data sets and different types of data about the patient. So patient history, their medical history, their past experience with different medications, so how they reacted to different estrogen, progesterone, different combinations of medications, their goals and lifestyle as well, to then make personalized recommendations and give them insights on their care journey in terms of their hormonal health. Because as you said, it's not just giving them, okay, this is the drug. It's also thinking about, could they be a PCOS patient? Do they need any extra investigation? So we're trying to piece all the things together that really enable personalized care in terms of hormone therapies. So we have assessments that patients do before the visits and then after the visit as well to see, how are you doing? Is this really working for you? Do we need to tailor the dose? Do we need to change anything? And we now do it across women's lifespans. So we started with contraceptives when the business started, but then our clinics and partners came to us being like, can you do this for menopause? Like, what about this patient, that patient? And we realized at the end of the day, it's literally just the same hormones and the response that we are looking into. So it's exogenous progesterones and estrogens that we are looking into. And then we'll shift towards more other hormone therapies as well that are used for certain conditions. But now we do it, across this sort of lifespan from menstruation to menopause. And the platform is used in clinical settings. I know we'll talk about all this as well, but that's the whole challenge. But there's also big opportunity to actually integrate those solutions into clinical care and workflows, which then enables both patients and providers to use the technology together to make those personalized decisions. And over time, for us, this means we are actually getting the data and understanding different patient populations, cohorts, different ethnicities, and seeing how different people react to hormones differently. And over time, we'll be building predictive models as well. So as of now, it's more of a knowledge-based AI system based on all the research and guidelines that we've found and accumulated so far. As well, we have like our own data sets as well. And over time, the more people use it, the more we will be able to improve our models. And as Dama as well, we have this R&D arm of the business. Probably differentiates us, makes us a difficult business because there's the digital SaaS and there's the R&D that we're doing. But what we're doing there is grant-funded research, actually fundamental research, as I was talking about the female biology gap, to look into what biomarkers, including genetics, impact our response to hormones. So we have our own data sets and biobanks at Dama of studies that we've done in the past. And then Aaron at Yale is also continuing his research. And this year we're doing another huge study in this. So it's all grant-funded. It's looking into the response and genetics and other biomarkers. And over time, we want to incorporate biomarkers to our models and algorithms. So it will be really like multimodal in terms of not only the phenotypic data on the patient and the medical records and their symptoms, but also the biomarker data. But as a company, we're very evidence-driven and we're trying to be really mindful about what data actually goes into the algorithms and making sure it's clinically useful. We've been kind of taking a staged approach to what goes into the algorithms, and same for the biomarkers. We're producing the data and evidence to say, actually, it is important to include this biomarker versus another.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. So it's a clinical application that's primarily used by the physicians. Is there a patient-facing interface?
Yes.
Or as a okay?
Yes, so there's both. So patient interacts with the platform to answer a lot of questions about their experience. Then we integrate with the clinical records, and then we produce a summary report and actionable clinical insights for the physician. And here is where the reason why we're in the US as well, there was a clear pathway to the market and clear regulations around being able to introduce something like this quite easily and quite fast as compared to other markets. So we are able to produce a report that goes to the physician, and then the physician can interpret that report with the patient. They can discuss it together. It streamlines their work and visit as well. And then there's a follow-up assessment as well. So very much integrated in the care pathway.
Gotcha. You already mentioned why it's important to personalize contraception, because it's a long-ranging implication and consequence for the patient and overall, like on the health care system in general. But also, I'm just curious more generally, why do you think personalization is so important for women's health in general?
This is a really good question, because I think there's just still an ongoing debate in the industry of like, is there point investing in like, prevention and personalization? And I think we're finally seeing a shift of just consumer demand and market shifting and the opportunity you can create if you do deliver more personalized care. The caveat is it's a bit more long-term. So just to recap, the current trial and error leads to higher dissatisfaction with patients, delays to treatment, those bothersome side effects, but also inefficiency in care, because it not only has like bad negative consequences on patients in terms of their long-term health, the quality of life, productivity, and relationships as well when it comes to mental health and libido challenges. But for the physicians and for the industry and pharma as well, there's negative consequences. So if you think about this patient coming in and out of the system, like there's multiple visits, wasted medications, delays to treatment, and just costs related to managing this patient, right? Managing the side effects, managing the adverse reactions, which is all potentially reducible for the health system itself, but also for the pharmaceutical companies. We've seen drugs being removed from the market because of the patient dissatisfaction, specifically with contraception, like that brand awareness is very important. But also other drugs across different areas in medicine that were removed because they had different side effect profiles in women and men. And we just didn't know why, right? Like, is the hormones affecting it? Like, what's going on? So there is generally like a big opportunity in the market to address this. And as you said, a lot of medicine remains trial and error, and we could really make very similar arguments for like a lot of different medications, right? This argument could be like about any other medication. But when you think about hormones and contraception, HRT, it's just the volume of this problem and how it affects any different types of care that this patient is receiving. So let's say take menopause. Every woman is going to go through menopause. Almost 99% of women, from the statistics that we know, at some point in their life will use a form of contraception. So then you have PCOS as well, infertility, endometriosis, PMS, and all of these conditions. And hormones also affect how we respond to other treatments. And there are studies showing that if you are taking the weight loss medications, the GLP-1s, and you take HRT, the outcomes are actually better. So it's just the volume of this problem, and the fact that we still don't know and don't understand is just really shocking. And that's why I'm so passionate about this and actually solving this specific one, because I think the impact can be so huge once we understand it better across medicine and across women's life. It's not just, the contraception, but also then the treatment of these other conditions and HRT and menopause as well. So I just believe it's really high time to figure out the personalization and just bringing precision to prescribing hormones.
Fair. And you said it's integrating the clinical workflows, which healthcare professionals sometimes tend to be resistant to change and stuff, and just integrating into kind of like the scaling a health tech solution like Dama requires a very seamless integration into clinical workflows, which again, as I mentioned, can be fragmented and resistant to change. Have you experienced any challenges in integrating Dama into different healthcare systems? And I guess how are you scaling? How are you thinking about scaling adoption across diverse clinical environments, from private practices to larger healthcare institutions?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and something that we probably don't talk about enough, I think, and just the reality for other founders entering this space. So if you're a health tech business and want to sell B2B health systems, clinics, and physicians, integration is just part of the game. Like, you just have to think about it and do it. And it's integration to workflows and also integration into health systems and their technology. So two main elements is obviously fitting into the clinical care and fitting into the EMR, so electronic medical records. So to get the first piece right, the way I think about it is really understanding the operations and workflows and doing like in-depth research with your customers and clinicians and thinking about which group and clinical setting is the best one to start working with. There's a very big difference as well across different health systems and their workflows, and really which one is the best group and workflow to integrate with. And here I've been literally on the ground, speaking to physicians and admin teams, shadowing, observing, visiting them in clinics. And for any interview and conversation I have with physicians, I always just ask, like, what do you do before, during, and after the visit? Even though I obviously have a good understanding as a physician myself and have a baseline, there's so many little things that clinics could do differently in different processes that they have implemented. Super crucial to get it right and understand, does our solution and our proposed flow work for them, or do we have to adapt it? And there is that level of customizability that you have to think about, and thinking about how much is too much and what is actually that you will have to just do with every client that you have. And then another piece is EMR, and we could probably talk about EMRs for a whole hour and like integrating with them. There's this whole field of how to best integrate with EMRs. The main thing to know is that doctors want things to be integrated in their EMR. Completely fair enough. Why would they want to log in into a million other platforms, right? So that's kind of just like, you have to take that as a face value. Like, you will want to integrate your solution at some point, one way or another, with the EMRs. The thing to know is that there's so many different EMRs in the market. However, Epic is the one to go for like hospital systems. So if you're a company doing things like, prevention of readmissions or something that do with critical care, your market will be hospitals, and Epic is your way to go. And then you can expand across so many health systems because you have that Epic integration. But there is an interesting move now in terms of EMRs. There's those other clinics, independent physicians, clinical groups, like this smaller part of the market, but growing part of the market is often using different solutions. They're more tailored, they're more specific for primary care. Epic is a very hospital type of system. So for these ones, what I've done is thinking about, okay, is there a pattern? Is there a pattern in the EMRs that similar clients seem to be using? Which one should I prioritize? Same as the pattern in the clinical workflow. Is there a pattern that a lot of doctors seem to be using? And can I basically use that as a bit of a trend across those similar early stage adopters? And it's really exciting also to see a lot of providers now switching to EMRs that are innovative EMRs, like there's startups producing EMRs and trying to fight the old school EMRs that are less integration friendly, like difficult to work with. So there's actually kind of a growing market as well of physicians, private practices, and new EMRs coming to the market that are more integration friendly. And we actually found a group of customers that are like in new type of physicians who are also using those new types of EMRs. And that's just like your perfect early adopter dream, right? Like you have early adopter clinicians who want to use new tools. They're already using a new EMR that is like API friendly. So you can kind of identify like what is the short-term low-hanging fruit of integration, and then how do we build upon that?
This might be a dumb question, but I'm still going to ask. In US healthcare system is quite different. It's like very private insurance, different hospitals. It's not really unified. Versus in UK, it's NHS is a national healthcare system. It's kind of like under one umbrella. What are the major differences when you're trying to, let's say, scale in UK versus if you want to scale in US?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And to be honest, that's why we've picked US as the prime main market for us, because of both places, it's quite a lot of fragmentation and quite a lot of challenges. If you get it right, the US market is so much bigger. So you have to still go through all the challenges, but then upside can be much higher. In the UK, technically you would think, oh, one system, it should be integrated, it should be all the same, but it's not. You still have to sell your solution trust to trust, which we haven't done in the end because you also need to really align with the NHS priorities. And as you probably know, currently is really firefighting, huge delays to care and treatment. I think we're still a bit, it's going to take a while until we can do personalized preventative healthcare under NHS. And I don't know, in what areas we will. So it's very much firefighting, shortages of staff and things like that. While in the US, there's a huge private market growing of those cash pay clinics that want to differentiate themselves. There's, huge trend in terms of longevity, optimizing health and wellness. So there's definitely a market for solutions like this. And I think generally the trend, I really want to believe that this is going to come mainstream. Like generally, I would love to go back to the GP practice and give them Dama now. It's just aligning it with the incentives of the health system. At the end of the day, right? Like you have to align and find like a financial value for the players that you're working with. And it's just finding the early adopters first, integrating with them, then showing your outcomes, showing your ROI, so return of investment, and then taking it more mainstream. So mostly focusing on the US market right now. Some of the EMRs are similar. Some of them are very different. Clinical workflows can be different. The reimbursement challenges are different. So one at a time.
Fair. You know what's fascinating to me? I mean, half of the world population are women. But historically, women's health has been quite underfunded in medical research and innovation. What challenges are you facing when you're trying to when you're trying to advance innovation in this space?
Yeah. As everything we discussed, there's plenty of challenges in health tech and med tech on its own, right? Like you have the integration, you have the reimbursement challenges, clinical safety, like all of that makes healthcare quite difficult. But in women's health, I think it's just like extra hard because of exactly what you just said. Lack of research and data means that you can't just go and create a new AI tool in a second. So to explain this a bit more, there is limited IP that you have in women's health to innovate on. So if you are an oncology company or a cardiovascular company, you can make like data sharing agreements with health systems or a biobank, and you build your model based on that. And then you use more AI to create more models and improve it. So you have like a baseline to start with. And that's unfortunately slightly missing in the women's health space and IP itself as well. So for example, when you think about weight loss companies, right? Like a lot of them are not actually developing weight loss drugs. That's what pharma does. And they've been investing and creating that IP for years now. And that those telehealth companies can just bring the IP to the market, commercialize it, marketing and all of that. So if we had that in women's health, like there's to be so much innovation that would just pick up a new novel drug or innovate on that and sell it and commercialize it. So we are a bit behind, a bit maybe being a bit like positive as well. So when we started Dama, my first thing was like, okay, well, I have experience in doing AI in healthcare and looking into models and training. Well, that's probably what we're going to do with Dama, right? I'm going to find a data set on hormone responses to therapies, and I'm going to build some models, and then we're going to commercialize it. Nope, there was no data on what we wanted to do. So we are building the data sets ourselves, which obviously over time gives our company also IP and proprietary data sets, but it's slower. It takes patience. It takes investment. So it's harder. I think it's hard in that sense in women's health because you can compare it to different companies and they already have the data sets, they already have the models, like they're already doing it at X, Y, and Z, but we have to actually very often start from from earlier stages. But things are changing. And I'm seeing a lot of new biotechs getting investment and some real serious IP heavy women's health companies, which is very exciting to see. I think, we can chat about it too, but a bit of a trend towards that direction is starting as well.
You're right. You're very much right. Like in 2020, between 2020 and 2022, there was a peak in general in biotech, but also there was a peak in health tech, digital tech, FemTech. There is like a sign of a rebound in 2025. I guess my question is, what has been your experience raising capital? Because you've raised some funding for your company. What's been your experience raising capital in FemTech, and with successes such as like Flow, do you think investor interest in women's health is finally shifting?
Yeah, you're very much right that there was a definitely investment wave around COVID. Obviously, I think a lot of hype, but also a really great injection of enthusiasm and possibilities. And kind of like COVID opened our minds to like, okay, health tech and digital health can really help. And I think, the adoption like increased so much, but also meant that there was quite a lot of like hype investments as well in that period of time. And I think it's actually fair enough, right? That investment then went down and really focusing a bit more on consolidating the startups that actually made sense. Healthcare is not an easy market. You have a lot of difficult challenges to go through, as we discussed, and you have to align your product and idea with incentives and regulation and finding the product market fit and who actually pays and who is incentivized to solve this problem in healthcare takes time, and it can be very difficult. There's, a lot of advice that you get from different startups, just talk to your customer, like just focus on that. But in healthcare, every time it's like they're your users, but they're not the payers. The patients and doctors, often they're the users, but not payers. So you have to figure it out, and it does take time. And that's why I think there's a lot of consolidation, because ideas that may seem amazing for patients and doctors that don't have a clear financial incentives, it's very hard to finance them. And I think there was a bit of that in that period of time. And in terms of women's health, you all know the stats, like it's harder to get an investment because we haven't had that many success stories as well. So as you said with Flow, like there's consumer products and consumer apps that gained traction and gained funding. And there's a lot of care delivery companies as well that did that in women's health. So Kindbody, Maybe, ED, these are the companies that actually provide clinical care. And I think we're just about to start seeing more and more funding that will go into those more IP heavy businesses. And we are seeing that. So that's what I'm really excited about. So things like companies that go beyond menstruation and reproductive health and fertility, because that's, what women's FemTech used to be. I think now we're looking at companies that are actually doing care across women's health, also thinking about autoimmune diseases and diseases that affect women disproportionately. We have new IP coming to the market and developing new devices. Continuous hormone monitors are getting funding and traction. There's novel drugs for endometriosis, ovarian aging that are getting funding. So I'm really excited about this shift in the investments from not just, the sort of D2C types of women's health models, but actually more like IP heavy,
R&D
heavy models as well in women's health, which is going to change, I think, women's health and open up new opportunities, because the more data we have and the more IP we have, that's going to spark more innovation. That's how things will roll, hopefully.
Exactly. And that is a perfect segue into my next question, which is the availability of data. And now the rise of AI is really changing the biotech, healthcare landscape in general. So I want to, as somebody who comes from a medical background, has deep, significant experience in AI as well, and has a health tech startup, I want to ask this question to you. How do you see the role of big tech and AI shaping the future of women's health?
So yes, as a startup founder in health tech, I'll be obviously biased towards being optimistic and enthusiastic about technology and data and AI. However, as a physician, I think it does take effort and really thoughtful consideration of doing it right in healthcare. And LLMs are obviously rapidly changing the world, and we have to adopt and change in healthcare too to stay cost effective and meet the demand of patients and consumers. And I think there's a huge potential in using AI and doing it well. So from things like analyzing the vast amount of data. So, thinking about what our future vision is to look into genetics, biomarkers, patient data, clinical history. Like physician would not be able to analyze at the point of care. Like you need technology to analyze all of that data. And I believe you can get it right. You can get AI-enabled physicians at some point, or like tech-enabled care pathways. But we need to manage the risks, and we need to create really high-quality solutions in health and healthcare to avoid. What I'm scared about is that we will have a few solutions out in the market, like adopted really quickly, but not without the right considerations. And that if something goes wrong, that can really pause a lot of innovation and adoption. So I think there is a bit of rethinking of how we actually introduce these things in healthcare, which we will, is just doing it right. So for example, thinking about case studies and like what is the lower risk where we can adopt solutions like this. So we are seeing a lot of automation and admin tasks, like, back office, healthcare, perfect, right? Like that's a perfect first step where we can train and learn and adopt something. And also thinking about use cases for when we use what type of AI. I think, now it's like everyone is using AI, and we've been talking about AI for years now, but now it's I think a bit muffled in terms of what LLM, what machine learning, like what using what AI. So it's also thinking about using the right AI for the right use case. So for example, LLMs are great in like summarizing data, extracting and data and summarizing things. We can use that for those purposes. For example, when it comes to recommending treatments and doing predictive stuff, I think the old school machine learning is still a great tool. So it's just really thinking about the use cases and managing the risk. So we've been using AI a lot at Dama and always had AI in our vision to do this predictive algorithms. But right now I use it for like product development, my own research, market research, like making myself more efficient, making our engineers more efficient. Like there's so much you can do to make your company more tech enabled as you're preparing yourself for the future that's coming, and using those LLMs in healthcare as well. So we are super actively trying to shape our strategy at Dama, reflecting those trends, leveraging technologies. I just want to ensure women's health doesn't fall behind, right? That we use all these technologies in women's health, but just doing it effectively and safely in healthcare. I think all of us need to think about it.
Gotcha. A very fair point. I guess one thing I'm curious about is, um, AI obviously works on data sets, and not all data sets are great, right? Some of them have noise, some of them are not great kind of like representation, and sometimes the uniqueness can be lost in that data set, right? Do you think, and the AI is, as you said, is the current hype, and which is obviously some of it is a bit too much hype, but there's a decent reason why it's a hype. Do you think, are we at the risk of over relying on AI in medicine, or do you think it's really the true path to unlocking the personalization and everything else in healthcare?
Yeah, I think there is a path where we have to leverage it to unlock things that we're just not able to do otherwise. However, I don't know why we have million AI scribes. I think there will be some consolidation in AI tools as well. And I think, I hope my thesis is that, like, if you're a startup that is integrated in the clinical workflows, done that heavy lift very well, is actually providing a solution as useful for patients and doctors, you have the data sets to make your models really good. Try to do it because you've already developed like workflows and algorithms that can help guide them. Then you have an edge. And that's why I'm thinking now we're going to structure this at Dama, of implementing it where the use cases make sense and leveraging the existing products and the heavy stuff that we developed, right? It actually is the integrations, the clinical partnerships. That's really takes time to develop all of this. And then you can do staged approach. And also I think there will be, as you said, healthcare is fairly risk averse and physicians have different risk tolerance, right, of adopting new things. But you can do things in a staged approach. So obviously when you have a first model that is knowledge-based, like they trust it, they know it's working very well, we can actually think about, okay, what would you like to try something like next level now? Why don't we add this new feature that is more like LLM-based to the product and see if you like it, see how you interact with it. It takes a lot of just trying it and seeing the value for yourself. I think that's what happened with the AI scribes in healthcare. Like physicians tried it, they saw so much value in it, and now it's the new norm. Like we're never going back. So I think things will change and will adopt. It's just doing it mindfully. I don't think that human connection and that sort of personal doctor touch will go, because at the end of the day, like that's what people want, and that's why doctors go into medicine in the first place. But it would be, I think, in my case, silly not to leverage the technologies that we can now to really take healthcare to the next level.
Fair. I guess looking in the future, the next 5 to 10 years, what other areas of women's health do you think will benefit from more personalized approach?
Everything. So no, I think there's very specific use cases where it makes sense to start with, and it's kind of same as staged approach, right? Like where do you start, where it makes sense in terms of early adopters. So we've been doing the hormone therapies because I think it's just the volume, as we talked about, so HRT, PCOS, endometriosis, contraception. I think next step is focusing on treatments, medications, therapies, drugs that are impacted by hormones. That would be like a next step for us. So as I mentioned, metabolic health, weight loss, to improve outcomes of using these medications, ideally would also optimize hormones. So that kind of works together very well. Then conditions that disproportionately affect women, and we don't know why, the drugs need to be tailored. So for example, autoimmune, really understanding the biology and pathways there, making personalized, I think would really improve the outcomes. And I'm super excited for like the new drugs that are coming to the market. As I mentioned, we have more biotechs and IP in women's health. So there will be new endometriosis drugs. There will be new drugs for ovarian aging, which I think they're already being developed with that personalized, precise medicine mindset. And thinking about who is actually going to benefit from this drug, like what type of biomarker analysis we have to do. How do we risk stratify? I'm seeing that in Alzheimer's as well. Like, can we do risk stratification on patients and really think about the female population? Who should get the interventions early? Things are really moving that direction as well, which are going to be very exciting. The new drugs coming to market, I think, are being developed already thinking in mind about which patients will benefit the most from this new drug.
Gotcha. Paulina, this has been a fascinating conversation because partly I'm selfish because this is a very interesting topic for myself, anything to do with healthcare and biotech. But overall, it's a very important, pertinent topic in general. But we're nearing towards the end of our conversation, so I have two more questions to ask, which are concerning Dama and concerning your broader reflections. Right? I guess for Dama, what's next for Dama Health? Right? Are there any upcoming product expansions or new initiatives on the horizon?
Yes, very exciting year. I think we're kind of piecing together all these trends and really going to market with something. They're responding to market now with the platform covering all the different pathways beyond contraception. So we are growing our clinical partnerships with different providers in the US. A lot of those cash pay providers that are setting up their clinics, very keen to work with new companies like ours and bring those technologies to market. And we also have this big project in endometriosis as part of a consortium. We're looking at patients and the response to hormones, but specifically endometriosis, to see which patients are responders and non-responders to hormones, which can then help us think about, okay, should this patient try the hormone therapy, or actually are they candidate for surgery? Are they candidate to enter a clinical trial for a novel drug? Like huge need in that population group in terms of understanding if they might respond to hormonal contraception, which is first line at the moment, or like GnRH medications as well. So a big research R&D piece for us to grow our data sets in biobank even more. And as I mentioned, we are ramping up the LLM use cases and AI strategy as well, because we can now accelerate it. Like, a few years ago, it was still very much, okay, I need to have thousands of data sets, build it, and then we'll start thinking about AI. And now actually we can leverage LLMs in so many use cases, even if it's internally, right? As I was talking about, accelerating our research, accelerating scraping literature, just internal like efficiency, which is very exciting. I'm enthusiastic of technology, so this has been really exciting for me internally.
No, it's really exciting, and I hope we can stay in touch so I can get more updates about your startup. I'm sure it will work out just the way you want it to work out. I guess just to wrap things up, to tie everything together, it's probably been a very arduous and long journey. Doing a startup is not easy. Doing a startup in healthcare is not easy at all. So looking back, if you could give yourself one piece of advice, before launching Dama Health, before embarking as a startup journey, what would it be? And how do you think that advice would apply to other health tech founders or other med school students who are trying to start their venture, navigating the challenges of building in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the good point of like, it's really hard. I think generally like, right, startups are hard. Health tech startups are even harder. Women's health tech startups are even harder. I mean, that's what I would want to tell myself of like, this is going to be really hard. So being persistent, patient, but also you have to stay flexible and really iterate quickly because market conditions will change, trends, political situation. For us, political situation right now, it's such an important piece.
Okay.
Technological developments, like all of that shifts and changes and will affect your business. And a lot of business success is often about timing and being able to iterate quickly and doing it in the right way, because the next wave of something is coming to the market and you just pivoted in the right way. So it's very, very different than what you know and are familiar with in terms of medicine. So you have to adapt and be agile while staying true to what you really want to put out there in the world and the mission that you have as a business. So it takes a ton of resilience, great team, problem-solving mindset constantly. This is challenge after challenge, and you just have to keep going. But it's a very rewarding journey. And if we can contribute to pushing medicine forward and health tech, the field forward, and like you build something that you want to see in the world, so it's very rewarding at the end of the day.
Well, this has been a very interesting, wonderful conversation. Again, thank you so much for your time. I wish you nothing but the best with your startup, with everything you do. And again, I hope we can remain in touch.
Of course. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for putting the story to the world.